Listen close, boy. I'm only telling you this once because some stories ... Some stories don't like being told more than that. They have a way of finding you afterward, following you home, whispering in the dark when the wind picks up. This is one of those stories. January 31st, 1921, Diamond Shoals, North Carolina. The place they call the graveyard of the Atlantic. And trust me, it earned that name honest. More ships have died on those sandbars than you've got years left to live. The ocean there is different, meaner, like it's got teeth buried just under the surface. WAITINGCP. Brady was the lighthouse keeper that morning. Good man, steady hands. The kind of sailor who'd seen enough to know when something was wrong. And that morning, when he raised his spyglass to the northeast, he saw something that made his coffee go cold in his cup. A ship, a goddamn massive ship, 5 masts tall, sails full and billowing in the wind like she was racing the devil himself. A schooner, the Carroll A, and she was heading straight for the Shoals at full sail, like she had somewhere important to be. Now, any sailor worth his salt knows you don't run full canvas near Diamond Shoals. You reef your sails. You slow down. You pray. But the Deering? She came in like a bride, walking down the aisle, beautiful, inevitable, and headed for disaster. Brady watched her run aground with a sound like the earth splitting open. The hull scraped across those hidden teeth, that grinding shriek of wood meeting sand and rock. And then ... silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind that tastes like copper in your mouth. He waited for the crew to emerge. Waited for the shouting, the scrambling, the chaos that always follows a grounding. Ships don't die quiet, boy. They scream. The men scream louder, but nobody came. The sails kept flapping in the wind. The rigging creaked and groaned. And the deck of the Carroll A remained empty as a church on Monday morning. Brady sent word to the Coast Guard. Took them 3 days to get a crew out there. Diamond Shoals don't forgive mistakes, and the weather was meaner than a wounded shark. But when they finally boarded her on February 4th, they found something that still makes old sailors cross themselves when they talk about it. The ship was set. You understand what I'm saying? Everything was in its place. Sails raised proper. Lines coiled neat. And down in the galley, there was food on the table. Not scraps. Not the picked-over remains of a last meal. Fresh food. Coffee still in the pot. Meat still on the plates. Not even cold yet. Like the crew had just stood up mid-bite and walked away. Or been taken. But here's the part that'll crawl into your dreams and make a nest. The ship's cat was still aboard, walking the deck like nothing was wrong, meowing for breakfast. You know what that means, boy? It means whatever happened, it happened fast. Because sailors don't leave a ship without taking the cat. That's the rule. The cat's the last soul off a dying vessel. Except this vessel wasn't dying. It was alive. Sailing itself home with a ghost crew, with sails set by hands that weren't there anymore, guided by a will that couldn't possibly exist. The Carroll A had kept sailing after everyone died. And before we go any further, before I tell you what I know, what I've seen, you need to understand something. This wasn't some mystery that got solved over a bottle of rum and a good detective. This is still open, still bleeding. The United States government investigated this for years. Years. They brought in the FBI, the Coast Guard, the Navy, even the goddamn State Department. And they found nothing. 11 men vanished like smoke. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. Just an empty ship that somehow knew the way home. You want to know what happened to the crew of the Carroll A? So does everyone else, boy. So does the sea. And I'll tell you right now, the sea ain't talking, but it's listening. Always listening. Now pour yourself something strong, because we're going back. Back to August 1920, when the Deering was still just a ship and her crew were still just men. Back to when this was just supposed to be a simple voyage down the coast. Just another job. Just another payday. Back to when they still thought they were in control. August 1920, Norfolk, Virginia. The Carroll A. Deering sat in harbor like a queen waiting for her subjects. And she was a queen. Boy, don't let anyone tell you different. 555 tons of the finest schooner engineering the Deering Company ever put in the water. 5 masts, 42 sails, 255 feet of wood and iron, and rope that could dance across the ocean like a ballerina when the wind was right. She'd been built in 1919, fresh from the shipyard in Bath, Maine. Still had that new wood smell. Still had her pride. This was only her second major voyage, and she was hungry to prove herself. The Deering Company had loaded her hold with coal 3,000 tons of the black stuff, bound for Rio de Janeiro. Simple cargo run. Down the coast, across the equator, drop the load, pick up whatever needed hauling back north. The kind of voyage that pays the bills and doesn't make the history books. Or so they thought. Captain Willis B. Wormel stood on the dock that August morning, watching his crew load the last of the supplies. He was 66 years old, a lifetime sailor with more voyages behind him than most men have hot meals. This was supposed to be his last run before retirement. One more trip. One more payday. Then he could buy that little house in Portland he'd been dreaming about, spend his final years watching other men risk their necks on the deep water. He was a good captain, fair, experienced, the kind of man who knew the sea's moods like a farmer knows his fields. But he was also old, boy. And the sea has a special hatred for the old ones who think they've figured her out. His son had been supposed to sail with him as first mate, but the boy took ill just before departure bad enough that he couldn't make the voyage. So Wormel hired a replacement, a man named Charles B. McClellan, now McClellan. McClellan was a different breed of sailor, 46 years old, built like a Maine winter, all hard edges and cold silences. He'd been at sea since he was a boy, worked his way up through the ranks the hard way. But there was something about him that made other sailors uneasy. The way he watched people, the way he went still and quiet when someone gave him an order, like he was swallowing something that tasted bad. The crew whispered that he'd been fired from his last posting for insubordination, that he had a temper like a spring-loaded trap, that he drank too much and trusted too little. But Wormel needed a first mate, and McClellan needed a berth. So they shook hands and called it fate. The rest of the crew was standard merchant marine stock. 9 men total, not counting the captain and McClellan. Danish sailors, mostly. Good workers. The kind who knew how to keep their mouths shut and their hands busy. Their names don't matter much now. They're all gone the same way. But they were there, boy. They were real. They had families. They had plans. They had no idea what they were sailing into. August 20th, 1920. The Carroll A. Deering cast off her lines and slipped out of Norfolk Harbor with the morning tide. The weather was fine. The wind was fair. Captain Wormel stood at the helm with that look old sailors get half satisfaction, half superstition. One more voyage. Just one more. The ship cut south through calm seas, down the Atlantic coast, past the Carolinas, past Florida, into the warm blue nothing of the Caribbean. The coal sat heavy in her hold, keeping her steady in the water. The sails sang their rope and canvas songs. The crew fell into the rhythm of shipboard life, watch and sleep, work and eat, the endless cycle that turns men into parts of the machine. But even then, before anything went wrong, there were ... tensions. Captain Wormel kept a log, like all good captains do. And in those entries, the ones that survived, anyway, you can read between the lines. Complaints about McClellan. The first mate was difficult, confrontational. He questioned orders. He spoke to the captain with what Wormel called a lack of proper respect. The crew noticed it too. McClellan spent more time below decks than a first mate should. He drank, he paced. And when he looked at Captain Wormel, there was something in his eyes that made even the hardest sailors check the location of the nearest belaying pin. But ships are small worlds, boy. Isolated. Once you're at sea, there's no walking away from problems. You're all locked in a wooden box together, floating on an abyss that wants you dead. You learn to swallow your anger. You learn to smile through your teeth. Or you don't. September rolled into October. The Deering made Rio de Janeiro without incident, unloaded her coal, and took on a cargo of general goods for the return trip. She was scheduled to make one stop in Barbados for supplies, then straight shot north to Norfolk. Easy. Simple. Nothing ever went wrong on the easy runs. They left Rio in early January 1921. Summer in the southern hemisphere, hot winds and following seas. The kind of sailing that makes young men think the ocean is their friend. And that's when the first cracks started showing. January 9th, Barbados. The Deering dropped anchor in Carroll Bay for supplies and fresh water. It should have been a routine stop. 2 days, maybe 3. Load up, pay the harbor fees, be on your way. But something was wrong. The harbor master noticed it first. When the Deering came into port, it wasn't Captain Wormel who hailed the dock. It was McClellan, the first mate. And he was acting ... strange. Agitated. When asked where the captain was, McClellan said Wormel was ill below decks. Too sick to come ashore. Too sick to handle the ship's business. The crew looked wrong too. Haggard. Nervous. They moved like men who hadn't slept in days. Like men who'd seen something they couldn't unsee. One of the local sailors later reported that the Deering's crew looked ill and disorderly. That they kept looking over their shoulders. That they spoke in whispers when they thought no one was listening. But here's the thing that still makes my skin crawl. Captain Wormel was never seen again. Not in Barbados. Not anywhere. The last confirmed sighting of Willis B. Wormel alive was before they reached Rio. Whatever happened to him, boy, it happened between Rio and Barbados. On the open ocean. Where there's no witnesses. Where the only law is the one enforced by the man with the strongest will and the sharpest knife. The Deering left Barbados on January 11th. McClellan signed the departure papers as acting captain. And that's when she sailed into legend. The ocean between Barbados and Cape Hatteras is 3,000 miles of blue nothing. 3,000 miles where anything can happen and no one will ever know. Where men can make their own rules. Where ships can disappear like they were never built. The Carroll A. Deering sailed north into that nothing on January 11th, 1921. And somewhere out there, in that vast emptiness, something went wrong. January 23rd Cape, Lookout, North Carolina. The Cape Lookout lightship, a floating lighthouse, basically, anchored in deep water to warn ships away from the Shoals logged an unusual encounter. The Carroll A. Deering passed within hailing distance in the late afternoon, close enough to see the crew, close enough to hear them shout, and what they shouted still echoes through maritime history like a scream in a well. A man appeared at the rail. The lightship keeper later identified him as the first mate, McClellan, and cupped his hands around his mouth. His voice carried across the water, desperate and strange. "We've lost our anchors." Now, think about that for a second, boy. A ship loses her anchors. It's a problem, sure. You need to report it when you make port. But it's not an emergency. It's not something you shout at a passing lightship like your hair's on fire. Unless you're trying to say something else. Unless "we've lost our anchors" is code for something darker. Unless you're a man who knows he's being watched, being listened to, and this is the only message you can send before someone drags you away from the rail. The lightship keeper tried to respond, tried to ask if they needed assistance. But the Deering was already moving past, driven by a strong wind. She didn't slow down, didn't heave to for a proper conversation, just kept sailing north, toward Cape Hatteras, toward Diamond Shoals, toward the graveyard. The keeper made a note in his log. Deering reports lost anchors. Crew appeared ... agitated. That was the last confirmed sighting of anyone alive aboard the Carroll A. Deering. But she wasn't done being seen. Oh no, boy, she kept sailing. For 8 more days. Other ships reported passing her. A standard oil tanker saw her on January 24th, sailing north-northeast, all canvas spread, moving fast. Too fast, like she was running from something. Or toward something. A fishing boat spotted her on January 27th, zigzagging off the coast like a drunk man trying to find his way home. Sails still set, no crew visible on deck. But she was moving, boy, responding to the wind. Someone or something was trimming those sails, adjusting the helm, keeping her on course. Or maybe the ship had learned how to sail herself. January 29th, a coastal steamer reported the Deering sailing in circles 20 miles off Diamond Shoals. Perfect circles, like she was looking for something, or waiting for something to find her. The captain of that steamer later said it was the most unnerving thing he'd ever seen. A massive schooner, all sails flying, carving perfect geometric patterns in the ocean under a clear sky. And not a single human soul visible anywhere on her decks. He said it looked like a ritual, like the ship was dancing. And then, January 31st, Diamond Shoals, the grounding, the silence. When the Coast Guard finally boarded her 3 days later, 3 days she sat there on those sandbars, sails flapping, ropes singing in the wind. They found a ship that told a story in absences. No crew, that was obvious. But also, no captain's log after the Barbados entry. Ripped out, gone, no navigational instruments. The sextants, chronometers, all the tools a ship needs to find her way across the ocean missing. Not broken, not damaged, missing, taken deliberately. No personal effects in the crew quarters. No clothes, no photos, no letters from home, nothing. Like the men had packed their bags and walked away. The lifeboats were gone, both of them. Davits empty, ropes cut clean. Someone had lowered those boats in a hurry. But here's what was there. Food on the table, fresh. A pot of coffee on the stove, still warm to the touch when they found it. Meat on plates, bread sliced and buttered. Like the crew had been sitting down to eat and just stood up, left, vanished. The ship's wheel was lashed in place, tied off with expert sailors' knots, locked in a position that would keep the ship sailing north-northwest, toward home, toward Norfolk. Like someone wanted her to get there, even if they couldn't. Charts spread on the navigation table, showing a course up the coast. Pencil marks indicating positions, times, calculations. The last entry, January 23rd, the day they passed Cape Lookout, the day McClellan shouted about the anchors. The crew's bunks were made, neat and tight, the way sailors do when they know they might not be coming back to them. And the cat, that goddamn cat, walking the deck like it owned the place, meowing for food, rubbing against the legs of the Coast Guard men like it couldn't understand why its humans weren't there anymore. The Coast Guard searched every inch of that ship, tapped the bulkheads listening for hidden compartments, checked the bilges for bodies, looked for blood, for signs of struggle, for anything that would explain what happened. Nothing. It was like the crew had been erased, not killed erased, plucked from existence by some force that didn't leave fingerprints. The government investigation started within days. And boy, they pulled out all the stops. This wasn't just some merchant vessel gone missing. This was 11 American citizens vanished without a trace in American waters. This was a problem. The Coast Guard interviewed every ship captain who'd seen the Deering. The FBI got involved, looking for signs of mutiny, piracy, foul play. The State Department worried about foreign agents. This was 1921. Remember, the Russian Revolution was fresh. The Red Scare was in full bloom. There were whispers that Soviet operatives were kidnapping American sailors for something. Intelligence, ransom, slave labor. They investigated Captain Wormel's background, McClellan's history, the crew's families. Looking for connections, motives, patterns, they found theories. God, did they find theories? Theory 1, piracy. Maybe the Deering encountered pirates in the Caribbean. Modern pirates, not the romantic kind. Men with guns who took what they wanted and dumped the evidence overboard. They could have boarded at night, killed the crew, stolen the navigational equipment and anything valuable, and abandoned ship before the Coast Guard could catch them. But the food, the fresh food, that didn't fit. Pirates would have eaten it or thrown it overboard. They wouldn't have left it sitting there like a museum display. Theory 2, mutiny. Maybe McClellan finally snapped. Maybe he killed Captain Wormel, or maybe the crew did it together. Maybe they took the lifeboats and tried to row to shore, make it look like the whole ship was lost, start new lives somewhere south. But mutineers don't lash the wheel on course for home. They don't set the ship up to sail herself. They burn the evidence. They sink the ship and scatter. Theory 3, rum runners. Prohibition was in full swing in 1921. The rum-running trade was exploding. Maybe the Deering was in the wrong place at the wrong time, saw something she shouldn't have seen. Maybe rum runners boarded her, killed the crew to keep them quiet, took the lifeboats to make it look like an abandonment. But again, the care, the precision. The ship left in perfect sailing condition, aimed for home. That's not what criminals do. That's what sailors do. And then there were the whispers. The theories the government didn't want to write down in official reports. Theory 4, the Bermuda Triangle. Oh, that name didn't exist yet in 1921. But the idea did. The idea that there's a patch of ocean where the normal rules don't apply, where ships and planes vanish, where compasses spin and time does funny things. Diamond Shoals sits right on the edge of that zone, boy. Right on the knife's edge between the known world and whatever the hell is out there in the deep water. Theory 5, the one no one wanted to say out loud. That maybe the crew didn't leave at all. Maybe they're still on the ship. Just ... somewhere else. Someone else. Caught between one moment and the next, trapped in a fold in reality that the ocean created when it decided to play games with human lives. Because here's what kept bothering the investigators. The ship sailed herself for 8 days, through changing weather, shifting winds, across hundreds of miles of open ocean. She trimmed her own sails, adjusted her own course, avoided other ships, found her way to Diamond Shoals with the precision of a homing pigeon. Ships don't do that, boy. Ships are dead things. Wood and iron and canvas. They go where the wind and current take them, nothing more. Unless they remember, unless they learn. Unless 11 men poured so much of themselves into that vessel, their sweat, their blood, their fear, their souls, that she became something more than wood and iron. Maybe the Carroll A didn't lose her crew. Maybe she ate them. And maybe, just maybe, she's still hungry. Let me tell you what I think happened, boy. Not what the government reports say. Not what the maritime historians write in their safe little books. What I know, deep in the parts of me that have spent too many years on the deep water, listening to what the ocean says when no one else is brave enough or stupid enough to listen. The Carroll A Deering left Barbados on January 11th with a dead captain in her hold. I don't care what the official records say. I don't care that there's no proof. You don't walk into port with your captain, too ill to be seen, and then have him never show up again unless he's not ill. He's done, finished, converted into whatever form dead men take when the ocean decides to keep them. McClellan killed him, or the crew killed him together. Doesn't matter which. What matters is that Willis B. Wormel never made it past Rio, and by the time the Deering anchored in Barbados, his body was wrapped in canvas and weighted with chain somewhere in 3,000 fathoms of water where no one would ever find it. Mutiny? Maybe. But I think it was something else. Something that happens on ships when men spend too long away from land, when the boundaries between discipline and chaos start to blur like the horizon on a foggy morning. I think Captain Wormel knew something was wrong with his ship. I think he felt it before anyone else did. That subtle wrongness, that sense of the vessel having opinions, having wants. Old sailors know the feeling. The way a ship can turn from a tool into a companion. And then, if you're unlucky, from a companion into something else. Something that watches you when you sleep. Something that whispers in the wind through her rigging. I think Wormel tried to turn back, tried to abort the voyage. And I think McClellan, whether out of greed or madness, or because the ship had already gotten its hooks in his brain, said no. And then I think the ocean, or the ship, or whatever force puppets both, made its choice. Between Rio and Barbados, the Carroll A Deering stopped being a ship captained by men. She became something else. By the time they reached Barbados, McClellan was in charge, but he wasn't in control. None of them were. You could see it in the way the crew moved, the way they looked over their shoulders. They knew they'd crossed a line, broken some fundamental rule of the sea, and now they were waiting for the bill to come due. The shouting about the anchors at Cape Lookout? That wasn't about anchors, boy. That was a man screaming for help in the only way he could. We've lost our anchors means we've lost our hold on reality. It means we can't stop anymore. It means this ship has torn free from every tether to the normal world, and we're adrift in something worse than any storm. McClellan knew by then, knew they were already dead, already gone. The ocean had decided, and all that was left was to play out the final act. Somewhere between Cape Lookout and Diamond Shoals, in that 8-day span where the Deering was seen but never hailed, never stopped, always moving, the ship took them. I don't mean they jumped overboard. I don't mean pirates killed them. I don't mean they rowed away in the lifeboats chasing some fantasy of escape. I mean the ship took them, pulled them down into her timbers, into her hold, into the spaces between the planks where the ocean seeps through and wood remembers every voyage it's ever made. The Deering was built from trees that grew for hundreds of years, boy. Trees that watched the world change. And when you make a ship from wood that old, you're not building a vessel, you're waking something up. The crew didn't leave. They were absorbed. Their souls, their memories, their last terrified thoughts, all of it poured into the grain of the wood, the weave of the canvas, the twist of the rope. The ship learned from them, learned how to trim sails, how to read the wind, how to navigate by stars they could no longer see, but remembered seeing. And then she sailed herself home. The food on the table, that was the ship's attempt at normalcy, at pretending it was still a vessel crewed by humans. Like a child playing house, mimicking behaviors it doesn't understand. The wheel lashed in position, that was the ship remembering routine, remembering that wheels need to be set, courses need to be maintained. The cat? The ship let it live because it didn't know what to do with something that wasn't human. The cat was outside the pattern, outside the hunger. And when the Deering grounded herself on Diamond Shoals, it wasn't an accident. She was presenting herself, offering her empty decks for inspection, saying, look at what I've become. Look at what you've made me. The Coast Guard men who boarded her felt it. Every single one of them reported the same thing in private, though they never put it in the official reports. The ship felt occupied, not empty, full, crowded with presences they couldn't see, but could feel, like standing in a room and knowing someone's behind you, even though you're alone. They heard breathing in the hold, heard footsteps on the deck above when they were the only ones aboard, heard someone humming a sailor's shanty in a voice that sounded like 11 voices layered on top of each other. The cat followed them around, meowing, and every man swore the cat was trying to warn them, trying to say, "Get off, get away. This isn't a ship anymore." The investigation went on for years, but they were looking for human answers to an inhuman question. The Deering Company wanted their ship back, wanted her salvaged, repaired, put back in service. Good vessel, valuable, only 2 years old. But the Coast Guard said no. They said the ship was a hazard to navigation, said she was unsalvageable, said the damage was too extensive. That was all lies, boy. The real reason is in a classified report that didn't get declassified until 1986. Crew refuses to work on vessel. Multiple reports of psychological distress. Recommend immediate disposal. They tried to get salvage crews to work on her. Offered triple pay, quadruple. Didn't matter. Men would step aboard, spend 20 minutes in her belly, and come back up pale and shaking, refusing to go back down, no matter how much money you threw at them. One salvager said he heard his dead brother calling his name from the bilge. Another said he watched a rope coil itself, neat and perfect, with no hands touching it. A third said he felt someone grab his ankle in the dark of the cargo hold, and when he looked down, there was nothing there, but he could feel 5 fingers, distinct and cold, holding him in place until he screamed loud enough that the other men pulled him out. So the Coast Guard made the only decision they could make. March 1921, 2 months after the grounding, they loaded the Carroll A Deering with dynamite, packed her hold with enough explosives to blow her into kindling, evacuated the area, set the fuses, and then they blew her to hell. The explosion could be heard 40 miles inland. The blast created a wave that washed over Diamond Shoals and scattered wreckage across 3 square miles of ocean. Wood, iron, canvas, all of it torn apart and sent to the bottom. The official report said, "Vessel destroyed to prevent obstruction of shipping lanes." The unofficial truth, we killed it before it could sail again. But here's the thing that still wakes me up at night, boy. Here's the part that proves the ocean never lets go of what it wants. They never found the lifeboats. Both of them, gone when the Deering grounded. Both of them missing from the wreckage after the explosion. Now, wooden lifeboats don't just disintegrate. They float. They wash up on beaches. They get tangled in fishing nets. They show up somewhere. But the Deering's lifeboats? Gone, vanished, like they rode away into some other dimension and never came back. And that means maybe, just maybe, 11 men are still out there, still rowing, still trying to get away from a ship that won't let them go, still caught in that moment between life and death, between the world of flesh and the world of wood, rowing through an ocean that exists in no atlas, under stars that set 1,000 years ago. Or maybe they made it to shore. Maybe they walked up onto some beach that doesn't exist on any map and started new lives in a place where ships that eat their crews are normal, where the ocean is the land and the land is the ocean, where everything is backward and wrong and hungry. I don't know, boy. Nobody knows. And that's what makes it so goddamn terrifying. The Carroll A Deering wasn't the only ship that vanished in those waters in January 1921. No one talks about that much. The historians like their mysteries singular neat, one inexplicable event at a time. But the ocean doesn't work that way. When it decides to feed, it doesn't stop at one meal. The USS Cyclops disappeared March 1918, but close enough in time and space to matter. 306 men. vanished without a trace in the Bermuda Triangle. Largest loss of life in U.S. naval history, not involving combat. No wreckage, no bodies, no distress signal, just gone. The Hewitt, steamer, last seen January 27, 1921, 3 days before the Deering grounded. Vanished somewhere between Sabine, Texas, and Portland, Maine. 42 men, never found. The Cabadello, freighter, disappeared January 1921, same waters. 30 men, gone. The Robert E. Lee, tanker, lost February 1921, just weeks after the Deering. 8 men, no trace. 5 ships, over 400 men, all in the space of 3 years, all in the same patch of ocean, all leaving behind nothing but questions and water. You start to see a pattern, boy. You start to realize this wasn't an isolated incident. This was a season, a feeding season. The ocean opened its mouth wide and swallowed everyone stupid enough to sail through. The government knew. Of course they knew. They compiled the reports, drew the maps, marked the locations. And then they classified it all and told everyone to stop asking questions because the investigation is ongoing. The investigation is still ongoing 100 years later. You know why? Because they can't close it, can't admit defeat, can't say, we have no idea what happened, and we never will. But I'll tell you what happened. The ocean decided those men belonged to it. And the ocean always gets what it wants. You can blow up the ships. You can recover the wreckage. You can interview every witness and build timelines and theories and arguments. Doesn't matter. The ocean keeps its secrets in the deep places, in the trenches that go down farther than mountains go up, in the dark where the pressure crushes submarines like tin cans. Down there, boy, the rules are different. Down there, time moves sideways. Down there, the dead don't stay dead, they change. Become part of the current, part of the cold, part of the hunger. And sometimes, on nights when the wind is right and the moon is dark, they come back up. Fishermen still report seeing her, you know. The Carroll A. Deering. Oh, they don't call her by name. They just say the ghost ship, the phantom schooner, that five-master with the full sails that appears out of nowhere and vanishes before you can raise a camera. Always in the same area, always near Diamond Shoals, always sailing north-northwest, toward home, toward Norfolk, toward a harbor she'll never reach. Some say, if you see her, you need to turn around immediately. Sail the other direction. Don't look back. Don't acknowledge her. Pretend you saw nothing. Because ships that see the Deering have a nasty habit of developing problems. Engine failures, navigation malfunctions, crew getting sick with fevers that make them talk in languages they don't speak. One fishing boat captain told me he saw her in 1987. Crystal clear night, moon full, sea calm as glass. And there she was, maybe half a mile off his starboard, every sail set perfect, moonlight making her glow like she was carved from pearl. He said he could hear singing, sailor songs, shanties, the kind men sing to keep rhythm while hauling lines. But the voices were wrong. Too many of them, all layered on top of each other like a choir, except every voice was the same voice, just shifted slightly out of sync. He said the Deering passed within 100 yards of his boat, close enough that he should have been able to see crew on the deck. But the deck was empty, and the wheel was turning by itself, spinning slow and steady like invisible hands were guiding it. He ran his engines full bore in the opposite direction, and didn't stop until he could see the lights of shore. Never went back to those waters. Sold his boat 6 months later and took a job in a cannery pensioners bear. He'd rather gut fish than risk seeing that ship again. I believe him, boy. I've heard too many stories like that to dismiss them. The ocean doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. The Carroll A. Deering broke the rules. Whether it was the captain's pride, or the first mate's mutiny, or just the bad luck of sailing through the wrong patch of water at the wrong time, doesn't matter. Rules were broken, blood was spilled, and the ocean remembers. So the ship is cursed to sail forever, never arriving, never sinking, just endlessly repeating that final voyage from Barbados to Diamond Shoals, carrying a crew that exists in the spaces between the wood, their voices singing songs that no one wants to hear. And here's the truly horrifying part, the part that should make you think twice before you ever step foot on a boat. They're not alone down there. Every ship that's ever sunk, every sailor who's ever drowned, every soul the ocean has claimed over thousands of years of human navigation, they're all still there, all still aware, trapped in a cold, dark existence that never ends, never offers relief, just the eternal pressure of water and the distant memory of sunlight. The ocean is the largest graveyard on Earth, boy. And unlike the graveyards on land, the dead here don't rest quiet. They swim, they sing, they wait. And when a living ship sails overhead, when they feel the hull cutting through the water above them, they reach up. Sometimes they miss. The ship sails on, the crew none the wiser, maybe feeling a chill they can't explain or hearing a sound that might just be the wind. But sometimes, sometimes they grab hold. And that's when ships like the Deering happen, when the boundaries dissolve, when the dead pull the living down, or the living pull the dead up. And the result is something that's neither. Something that sails but isn't sailed. Something that exists in the twilight between the world you know and the world beneath the waves. The government destroyed the Deering's physical form, blew it apart, scattered it across the ocean floor. But you can't destroy what it became. You can't kill a ghost by shooting the house it haunts. So she sails on, in some version of reality, some fold in the fabric of the world where the rules are written in salt and blood instead of physics and logic. And one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe 100 years from now, some young sailor is going to look out across calm seas and see 5 masts rising from the horizon. See full sails spread perfect against a darkening sky. See a ship that looks solid and real and wrong. And he's going to have a choice. He can turn away, pretend he saw nothing, sail on to safety and spend the rest of his life wondering. Or he can sail closer, can try to hail her, can attempt to board and see with his own eyes what haunts the deck of the Carroll A. Deering. I'll tell you right now, boy, if you're ever that sailor, if you ever see her out there in the deep water, turn away. Don't look for answers. Don't go seeking truth. The ocean's secrets are kept for a reason, and men who pry them open don't come back the same, if they come back at all. The Carroll A. Deering sailed with 11 men and returned empty, but she's not empty anymore. She's full of hunger, full of memory, full of that peculiar madness that comes from being neither alive nor dead, neither ship nor graveyard, but some horrible combination of both. And she's still sailing, boy, still looking for her 12th crew member, maybe her 13th, maybe her 100th. The ocean's patient. It's got all the time in the world. And it knows, sooner or later, every sailor comes home to the deep water. Every single one. The old quartermaster leans back, his pipe smoke curling in the dim light. Outside, you can hear the wind picking up, the distant sound of waves against hull. He looks at you with eyes that have seen too much. So what do you say, Murillo? Still want to go to sea? Still think it's romantic, sailing off into the sunset with nothing but water between you and the horizon? Or do you understand now? Do you feel it in your bones? That ancestral fear that kept your ancestors on land for thousands of years before some damn fool decided to tie logs together and float? The ocean is not your friend. It's not neutral. It's not indifferent. It's hungry. And ships like the Carroll A. Deering? They're not cautionary tales. They're invitations. The sea is always recruiting, boy. Always. He stands, knocks the ash from his pipe against the rail, and looks out at the dark water. Now get below. Storm's coming. And we've got a long way yet to sail. The Salt and Bones Archive Notation. This account was transcribed from the personal logs of the quartermaster aboard the merchant vessel Eternal Drift, recovered after the ship was found abandoned off the coast of Maine in November 2024. All crew missing. Last entry in the ship's log: we saw the Deering. God help us, we saw the Deering. No further information available.